My name is ASHA and this is my story. Well, I was born in Fiji in a small village called Tavarau and spent all of my childhood and most of my adult life. It was fun, very carefree. There were no limitations, but we were taught values and morals and all those things by our parents, but we had a very carefree life. Very adventurous as well for a small girl coming from an Indian background. Most of the houses, including ours in the village, was sort of built out of grass. So we had mud as the floor, and then we used to apply cow dung onto it to just make it a bit smooth, and everything else was made of grass, the walls and the roof. It was all village life. We used to grow a lot of all our supplies, all our vegetables, all the lentils we used. My father used to plant rice as well, so you had a supply of rice. And we hardly had any furniture. For a long, long time, when my father would make furniture, he used to make our beds and the tables and the chairs. This used to be sugarcane manure bags. When I was a little girl, this is what we slept on, this is what we studied on, this is what sort of basically sustained us. So it was the bare air and this. I have no regrets with the kind of life I had, and if I ever have to go back to live that life, no qualms, I can do that. I got exposed to farm life from a very young age, and my father was a cane cutter, and to this day he's never been able to sort of educate himself in the sense that he cannot read or write. This is my dad, Hari Prasad. This is his cane knife actually, and of course the hoe, and these were his tools of trade. My father worked on a cane farm, and he actually owned a cane farm in Fiji, and he was a cane cutter by trade. That was his profession. So he used this cane knife to harvest cane and actually for planting sugarcane as well. So when he was migrating to Australia in 1991, he was giving all his things away to people in the village, and I decided to take this cane knife from him. So that's the story of the cane knife. My father always wanted me to be a lawyer, but my mother said, oh, you can do really well as a teacher. But then my brother saw this advertisement for a cadet journalist. I got selected to start my cadetship as a journalist working for the then Fiji Sun. And I did all sorts of news coverage, right from politics to reporting on court, to going and sitting in the High Court to report on murder trials, to attending political meetings. I had written a few stories that really put the government under the spotlight in terms of the level of corruption. And then in 1997, I went away to cover the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Edinburgh. And Rambuka at that time, the man who had staged the first coup in 1987 was Fiji's Prime Minister. He was the Prime Minister of the country, and I was the only person representing the media from Fiji, and he denied me that opportunity only because earlier I had written stories about the level of corruption in government. And yeah, so that led to a bit of a confrontation, and which I don't really want to go into detail about. Yeah, in fact, the whole experience of trying to do what I thought was right for me to do as a journalist, and the real experience of being personally being threatened and all really led to me, or to my husband saying to me, look, for how long can we keep on living like this? And of course my responsibility at that time was, of course, as a wife, as a mother, and that will always be my priority. And so we made a decision that the two of us, my husband and I, made that, I think it's time to sort of look beyond this, and we moved from Fiji. Coming to Australia as a permanent resident was really overwhelming. I actually cried when I first arrived here. when the plane touched down, and there was a certain degree of fear that overcame me, and I thought, oh, what will I do for a living? How will I be able to feed my children and look after them and be a good mother and be able to work? But then I suppose my life experiences and my experiences in the field of journalism made me a strong woman. When I applied for this for my job as an academic, as a journalism lecturer, not so much a journalism lecturer, actually when I started teaching, one of the first subjects that I taught was in public relations. And I hadn't practiced as a public relations practitioner as such, but I was able to run lectures in what you call, what were the units then? So much has changed since I started teaching. So I was a full-time mother for almost a year. And then I thought maybe I need that level of stimulation to keep going. That sort of set the ball rolling for another sort of career path for me. My first couple of days in the university environment was a real shocker for me. In one of the classes, the lecturer had asked us to do some research on the internet, and I said to him, so how do I go about doing that research? And the students just sort of booed me for saying that. And then a really kind Scandinavian student sort of nudged me and she said, don't worry, I'll show you. And so I learned a lot from her. A couple of weeks into that position as a student in the university, I raised my hand and asked a few questions of the lecturer. And his next question to me was, what do you do for a living? And I turned around and I said, oh, I'm a housewife, but I've worked as a journalist all my life. He turned around and said, do you want to teach here? And I smartly said, why not? And I sat down. And then finally ended up getting a casual tutor position within the university. The Chutney Generations exhibition became part of my PhD research. I came up with this idea of curating an exhibition whereby I would invite the community members to share their treasures from Fiji in an open space. And the exhibition sort of included a launch, a very colorful launch with Bollywood dancing and traditional Indian singing and dancing, as well as kava ceremonies and a colorful display of all the items that the people were willing to share, including my father's cane knife. Every Sunday of those 3 months, we had chutney making classes, henna classes, tabla classes, as well as a academic forum. And the whole issue of values in the Australian community was under a lot of scrutiny, so I selected that as an issue for debate.
The first and most important thing I must say is congratulations to every single one of you completing your degrees.
I suppose coming to university was sort of encouraged me or provided me the avenue to continue that process of learning. There's never a dull moment in journalism, and so I find that teaching also provides me that opportunity where there is no dull moment, and I get a real thrill out of being in a classroom where I'm able to really nurture and mold the students to become real good journalists, ethical journalists, and that's what's required in this day and age. Unfortunately, my mum is no more, otherwise she'd be really thrilled to know that I've finished my PhD, because the only other person in my family with a PhD was her late brother. I find the fact that we are so blessed to be living in Australia, to start off with, the fact that there's so much opportunity out here. And the kind of opportunities that have been available to me, as well as to the students, as the opportunities that have been available to my own children. It's a journey, it's been a journey. I've just accomplished a part of the journey, but it's an ongoing thing, and I think we all need to open our minds to those possibilities. And once we do that, there's so much scope and opportunity. My name is ASHA, and this is my story. I was born in a small village in Fiji. I spent my early childhood working in the sugarcane fields in Fiji, along with my father and brother. I worked as a journalist covering politics in Fiji. Going to university was a turning point in my life. I'm now a lecturer at university, and I'm so grateful for the opportunities